Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of HFS Unfiltered. And today we are going to talk about cloud, and not just cloud, but how do we get real business value from our cloud initiatives. In fact, HFS and IBM, both of us partnered and surveyed about 500 plus senior executives across the globe, across global 2000 enterprises, to really understand where we are on this transformation journey on cloud. And I think it was a very fascinating study, and at least I learned a lot from it, where we realized that cloud is still amongst the top three most critical investments for most enterprises. However, only one in four can demonstrate a hard ROI or business benefits from cloud transformation. I think it's very evident from this study that we did together with IBM that cloud is no longer just a technology conversation. Cloud is driving business forward, but tangible business value remains elusive. So, to unpack all of that and discuss how we can make that happen, it's my pleasure to invite my two guests today, Varun Bijlani from IBM and Tom Reuner, my own partner in crime at HFS. Uh, Gentlemen, do you mind quickly introducing yourselves? Maybe Varun, we'll start with you.
Sure, Saurabh. First of all, thank you to you and to Tom for having me in this conversation. Uh, my name is Varun Bijlani. I have the privilege of running what is called our hybrid cloud services business globally at IBM Consulting. And therefore, we help clients with executing, with defining and executing on their cloud strategies to drive business outcomes.
Thanks, Varun. And just turning tables on my side. So I run our IT service practice. So on one hand, literally the topic at hand, helping clients think through what does cloud transformation really means to them. Should we even talk about cloud when we talk transformation as a broader context? And then all the way, all too often forgotten, quality assurance, quality engineering is how do we ensure those outcomes? And with that, I think the topic at hand is I'm getting as passionate as Varun about it. So I'm looking forward to the discussion.
So, Varun, let me start with you. You in particular, but IBM in general has been talking a lot about hybrid cloud and uh, you know, um, how do you master hybrid cloud? As we all went through this study and looked at the findings, what were the key lessons learned from your perspective for IBM and for your clients from this research initiative?
So I think, Saurabh, the study was very helpful and significant in that it took the conversation about hybrid cloud significantly forward. Almost all enterprises are hybrid by default. And what it called out that there are still a number of challenges around either cloud sprawl, unrealized use cases, and in that entire space, I think there were some very critical reminders. And I'll repeat one or two things of what you already said. One, this was it's about a acknowledgement by almost the entire set of our survey that this is a business conversation, not a technology conversation. And in fact, hybrid in that context is not just about hybrid across multiple technology platforms, it's also hybrid across business and IT. The second piece of this is that in terms of being recognized as a critical portion of the enterprise's priorities as part of their digital transformation strategy, cloud is playing a critical role. The third, I think, is around the lessons learned. There are enterprises that you've called out in the survey as being business cloud masters, those who got this right. What did those 1 in 4 that got it right and were able to articulate ROI, what did they do? What were the patterns? And I think those lessons are very powerful from this conversation. Let me pause there for a moment.
No, Varun, I think I especially liked the way that you articulated that hybrid cloud is no longer just a private and public, not just a technology hybrid, but also business plus IT coming together. And I think that sounds very simple, but we found that practically that's the biggest challenge in actually driving value from cloud. So Tom, putting your research hat on, what were the key lessons learned from your perspective, on this study? What are the action items that you are recommending to our enterprise clients?
No, thanks, Saurabh. And I think Varun articulated well and just built on it and perhaps just pivot slightly, looking at the action items. So the things organizations should take into consideration. And just building what Varun has said, I think it's so important that organizations pivot to an outcome-centric mindset. But that outcome-centric mindset is not just about technology. And all too often, organizations just get stuck in technology, quite frankly. And probably a good way to think about what does really becoming cloud native means. Varun mentioned it. It's embracing private and hybrid cloud, but not only that, it's bringing IT and business together. And again, it's easy to state as an analyst, we don't have operational responsibility. That's where the hard work is coming in. But it also requires clarity. What's the future state for organization? And here, if I'm honest, the supply side, I don't think have done a great job helping organizations thinking that through, because all too often those discussions are confined to technology. And a similar, we come back to that in a moment, what's this cloud target operating model? Because cloud or becoming cloud native should mean working differently. So again, don't retrofit into traditional operating models. So the second point, and just building on that, organizations have to redesign their cloud programs. And just again, not going through all the points yet again, but almost move beyond technology. It's not just embracing cloud technology. But I think the key thing is to now have the clarity on the operating model and the big resistance. There's not such thing as one operating model. So anybody telling us there's a template, the thing you see on Google or somewhere, it's as specific as the organization. It's about personalization, if you like, for an organization. And the last point, and it's probably the most challenging point, how can we align IT and business stakeholder? Because that's also underpinned by a lot of change management. And I think here is the biggest opportunity, because I think if you look out, we have the swan song, so often we said the CIO is dead, but actually we see another CIOs reinventing themselves, becoming something like an executive coach for their more business-centric executives. And I think it's all about collaboration. And that for me, then cloud or cloud native means anything. It's then working different and doing collaborative work. That's the essence of it.
So Varun and Tom, as we were looking at this data, one of the key things that stood out for me was, only 1 in 4 people or respondents said that they can actually demonstrate a hard ROI on business benefits from their cloud. And we all know that in surveys, everybody wants to do well. So the reality might be even lower. But but what does that mean for the broader cloud conversation, right? And is there, how do we cut through that market noise? And what does this really mean if 3 out of 4 people are not realizing what they're using cloud for from a business benefit perspective? What does that mean for the broader cloud narrative? I know, Varun, this is what you eat, live, and breathe every day. What are your thoughts on that particular finding?
First of all, it felt closer to the truth than just the hype around the place. So it was important. A lot of it links to what Tom was saying. But I think there are a few patterns that I'll elaborate on. When we talk about the clarity of the business to IT blueprint, what does that actually mean? We are seeing those that are being successful being more product centric and using that to prioritize the business to IT blueprints. And then once you've prioritized, to use that to make intentional choices with regards to your architecture. So for example, what does my loan origination domain really need? What does my baggage handling domain really need? What does my gas trading domain really need? And when you start looking at it from that perspective, you start making more specific architectural choices. It's not like defining an ideal architecture from day one, spending all your time trying to get there, which actually only delays ROI or worse, stalls programs. So that's one very critical factor, truly anchoring on what are those priority domains, what shifts do you want to make. In fact, one of my clients, when we were having this conversation, said, my issue is not about the rapid changing demand of my customers. That's not the business I am in. This was a private bank for high net worth individuals. And they use a term that I want to go from debt by default to debt by design. Uh, That's brilliant. That's a focused conversation, and you can slice that down into business priorities. Another client, the CEO of a telco, said, Varun, then are you saying this is less about the technology architecture? It starts with what are the priority business decisions you need to make? And that's exactly what it is. So that's one critical area. The second aspect I'd like to call out is what you use the word broader cloud discussion. So what does broader mean? I think broader has got three components to it. Number one, which products and services are you genuinely trying to transform? Number two, have you clearly laid out for those products and services, how is my operating model going to change? My team, my ways of working, my operations. And three, therefore, what technology architecture do I need to support this? Which is, what sort of container platform do I need? What developer platform do I need? What AI and ops platform do I need? And of course, what security platform do I need? When we've seen this sort of a focused or an intentional view, you cut through the noise, and therefore you start looking at this by design. And I think that's what important in defining your roadmap and articulating a business case to your board.
So hybrid by design is really, if I was to just say it in my own words, Varun, it's really focusing on the why, not the how so much, right? How will come from the why, but I think which is very powerful, right? Because I've seen so many CPG companies. We just did another study, Varun, where 8 out of 10 CPG companies want to go direct to consumer. Now, how do they go direct to consumer? They'll have to cloudify. But I think we focus so much on the cloudification that we forget the why of going direct to consumer is really the why for them. And for that, cloud becomes essential. And that's really your hybrid by design principle. Am I getting that right?
Oh, absolutely spot on. Absolutely spot on. And in fact, very recently there was an article in Forbes from the person who owns the platform at LinkedIn, and they were also talking about a very similar framework: the why, the what, and the when. So always starting with the why, that defines what you're going to do, and that defines the speed with which you do it. One of our clients, they were looking at transforming their team, and rather than changing the entire operating model of all their different teams, they said, these are the two domains I want to prioritize. For those two domains, I'm going to go into a squad based working, and for the others, I'm going to keep with my existing shared services teams. So now you're focusing your transformation of your people and technology to that direct priority, and then you start releasing ROI within months, as opposed to within longer periods of time.
It's a great point. I think what you define as why, Arun, I think it's exactly the business objectives we discussed earlier on. So exactly spot on. Yeah.
So let me ask you both one more question, which you cannot have a conversation without talking about Gen AI these days, right? So what does generative AI, what is the role of generative AI in this cloud conversation? And also, what's your view on, is it actually enabling the cloud conversation, or is it actually distracting from that why conversation that we were just having? Maybe Varun, you go first, and then I'll ask Tom to weigh in.
Sure, thank you. You're absolutely right. You cannot today have a conversation on any subject without acknowledging generative AI and its transformative impact on what we do. So I'm going to hit your first, your words about, is it enabling or distracting? my view, it is absolutely enabling. And in fact, because it changes the way we do everything, if you hesitate and assume it distracts, beware, because your competition is already doing it. So I think first thing is you should be experimenting. And it's okay to acknowledge that a number of different enterprises are today exploring and experimenting. And then before you land up with an uncontrolled AI sprawl, there are lessons that you can learn from organizations that have created, operating models to handle use cases, to harvest almost a inner sourcing of ideas, to align security, legal, etc., for generative AI. But to come to your link about what is it, what's the connection between hybrid cloud and generative AI? I think it's a very tightly symbiotic relationship. Number one, generative AI accelerates your hybrid cloud transformation, right from defining your business case to be able to help you create your architecture, code conversion, code creation, managing your apps and infrastructure on the cloud. All of them get accelerated and enhanced with generative AI. And consequently, on the other side, generative AI, in order for you to scale Gen AI and the value of Gen AI, you do need a hybrid cloud architecture. Imagine accessing multiple different models, some use cases in different parts of the organization, users being on the edge. When you need to start considering all of those things, including wanting to use your own private data along with those models, you need a robust hybrid cloud architecture to scale that going forward. I hope that helps.
So you need Gen AI for cloud, and you need cloud for Gen AI. Tom, what's your opinion on
I
this?
have a slightly different view. I think the discussion, I think, is immensely unhelpful because it's so confused. Most stakeholders who make all that noise at the moment don't even understand the basic. What is Gen AI? What's AI? Building on what Varun said, because fundamentally, it should be holistic and it should be supporting the argument. What clients have to do, get their head around it's cloud, data, and AI. If we move, once we define what that kind of cloud-centric mindset or cloud-native mindset, as we discussed earlier, becoming product-centric, time to market, all those things, of course, cloud, data, and AI are fundamental on that. But I think the market is so unhelpful. And if anything, I think we are reliving, but also making the same mistakes again. If you go back in memory, I'm the failed historian in this audience. If you go 10 years back, we had the same discussion. We're almost embellishing capabilities, highly aspirational. And I think we're doing exactly the same as Gen AI. I think the good thing is, and some of there's research, which is not yet published around supply chain, some of what we're hearing, I think on one hand, clients are starting to cut through that noise and starting trying to scale. So they want to learn the lessons, what is needed to be done to scale, and that's all the points Varun rightfully made, because that's a grown-up discussion we need. But then we have to move forward. But we're seeing that research, if we can extrapolate it to the broader market, that organization pausing, delaying, reassessing the Gen AI projects, in itself, that's probably a good thing. Then it took the cloud market more than 10 years to get mature. If anything, we see not just almost a compression of the innovation cycle, which is frightening for many clients, but hopefully at least we can also compress some of the learning experience. Again, it took a long time, and we still, if anything, what we learned with the study, we haven't mastered cloud as yet. I think hopefully we learned so many lessons. Hopefully we got so many inspirations for organizations, some of to look at and learn from. But again, some of on AI and Gen AI have a slightly different view. There's so much we have to do to cut through that market noise.
I think both of you are saying that, jump into it, experiment with it, try it. The value is immense, but do it with your eyes wide open, and just don't jump into it for the sake of it. Do it with your eyes wide open. Be prepared for some failures, be prepared for some learnings, but the potential is immense. And if you don't try it, and if you're an ostrich, with your head buried in the sand, then your competition will do it. And so it's fascinating. So look, I think we can go on forever, uh, uh, but I know people's attention spans are short these days. So I would like to ask you one final question, and a personal question. So if maybe Tom, I'll start with you. So if you had one wish that could come true, you know, and don't make it about your family, but make it about cloud.
For what
uh,
one should expect.
what would that be?
No, I think just the double clicking. I think the point Varun makes so eloquently. I think it's pivoting to the why. It's pivoting to business objectives. That's what it's all about. Everything else has to support that. And if you get our head around that, I think that's also, and there's so many learnings from the study. That's one thing, some of closest to my mind. Varun?
I like that you said that, Tom, because I'll cheat by saying yes, Tom's point, but I can add one because I've been asked myself, and I would add another side to it, which is, which is, if I had a magic pill for being able to get upskilled in this area, the speed at which things are going, so that we can make more intelligent and intentional choices. So I'll put that one as the wish along with the why.
Well, I sincerely hope that this little recording, these 15 minutes, will help people in that wish, even if it's in a little bit. That's the whole objective of these series. So if nothing else, listen to this to fulfill Varun's wish. um, but but thank you both. I think it was a fascinating conversation. We should continue this dialogue because I don't think the story has reached its end. It's only just starting, as the research sort of points out, and as we're hearing from clients. So let's keep talking, let's keep discussing and debating, and we'll come out of it in a positive way. So thank you, Varun. Thank you, Tom. I learned a lot from this conversation, and I hope our audience took away something as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much.